Hello, everyone. I am Shrutika Yola. I wanted to thank you all for joining today's member webinar, Climbing Ladders and Swinging Branches, Establishing Roots to Support Genetic Counselor Professional Advancement. We encourage questions to be asked throughout the presentation. As a courtesy to our presenters, all attendees have been muted. Please utilize the Zoom chat box to type any questions you may have throughout the presentation. Questions will be read aloud during the last 10 minutes of the webinar. Today's learning objectives are: contrast innovative new approaches to career ladder development and adjustments amongst various settings, including academic, industry, and clinical. Demonstrate what goes into the development of a career ladder. Discuss how to leverage the career ladder for your own professional benefit, and apply data compiled across multiple career paths to understand the experiences of genetic counselors related to career progression. Today we are joined by speakers Yiro Zhao, Don Laney, Kathleen Gawanter, and Kylie Johnson. Yiro Zhao is a licensed in multiple states, board-certified genetic counselor and bilingual Mandarin English speaker. She provides prenatal, preconception, and hereditary cancer genetic counseling since her joining GeneScreen in 2019. Prior to her genetic counseling training, she worked at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign for her postdoctoral training in breast cancer research. She obtained her PhD in genetic and molecular biotechnology from Michigan Tech University and holds a Master of Science in Genetic Counseling from Brandeis University. Don Jacob Laney is a genetic counselor, assistant professor, clinical researcher, program leader of the Lysosomal Storage Disease Center, and director of the Genetic Clinical Trial Center in the Department of Human Genetics at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Her clinical and research interests are focused on Fabry disease. She is a co-founder of Think Genetic Inc., which empowers patients who want to know about the possible genetic causes for their medical issues or obtain real-life answers to their questions about the impact of living with genetic disease. Ms. Laney also enjoys writing children's books, most of which are about living with a genetic condition. Kathleen Gawanter earned her master's in genetic counseling from the University of Maryland, Baltimore in 2015. Following graduation, she became a cancer genetic counselor at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida, where she enjoys being part of a collaborative team of genetic counselors and other providers bringing optimal care to their patients. Kylie Johnson manages clinical operations, including direct supervision of the genetic counseling and genetic counseling assistant teams. She develops and upholds rigorous quality measures, continuous improvement efforts, standard operating procedures, and patient satisfaction standards. Kylie is a board-certified genetic counselor with more than 16 years of experience, with extensive experience in telehealth, clinical service, and physician and patient education. Her experience includes 8 years at the Mayo Clinic, where she was integral to the launching the Center for Individualized Medicine Clinic, focusing on new clinical technologies for patient care. She was also an adjunct instructor and clinical supervisor for the University of Minnesota graduate program in genetic counselor. And now over to our speakers.
Thesis study. The title is Academic Appointments for Genetic Counselors. We talk about the opportunities, challenges, and the career trajectories. So this study was done in 2018 as a requirement for my master degree at Brandeis. So as we all know, academic responsibilities or tasks are common to genetic counselors, whether or not you hold such a position. In the PSS from 2018, 22% of genetic counselors have reported faculty appointments, and this number increased to 25% in the most recent survey. However, there's a later gap of career path in academic for genetic counselors. For this study and for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to summarize the findings in 5 categories. We're going to review the current positions held by the genetic counselors. We are going to talk about their responsibilities reported, the requirements and the satisfaction rate about their job, and the challenges they face. We received 176 total responses after removing the incomplete ones. We end up with 119 of the responses from the participants currently holding a position in a faculty in academic setting. 11 of them were in the process of attaining such a position, and 14 of them had unsuccessful attempt to get such a position. I'm mentioning these two, so for this talk, we're going to present the data from the 119 current positions. However, I want to acknowledge the 11 and 14 responses because they do provide different angles and perspectives in this really important topic. In the overview of the current positions, we look at the titles they held, the tracks they're in, whether or not they're affiliated with the GC programs, and through which institution in the schools these positions were offered. We also look into their education history, whether or not they held a second advanced degree. It reported that a majority, 89% of them, get their position through University Medical Center. 77% of them get their position through a medical school. 43% of them were affiliated with a GC training program. 25% of the participants are program directors, associate assistant directors from a GC training program. From now, in the later slides, some of the data will divide it into the comparison between the ones which are associated with the GC programs and with the ones which are not associated with GC programs. Looking at the titles of the positions, majority of them are instructors, lecturers, assistant professors. For the professor and associate professors, which are on the higher rank of the academic setting, or held by the ones who are in the leadership position in the GC programs. For the ones who are in a non-leadership position in the GC programs, and for the ones who are not affiliated with the GC programs, most of the titles were instructors, lecturers, assistant professors. We look at their experience of getting such a position. On this chart, in the light green portion, they claim that about 54% of them claim that they got the position through automatic appointment upon hiring. To clarify, this means they did not intend to apply for a faculty position. The faculty position or the appointment was attached to the position they were applying for. 20% of them said they had to separately apply for academic appointment. 22% of them claim that their institutions do not normally grant faculty appointments for GCs without holding a PhD or MD degree, meaning the 20% of them had to make extra effort to get the position, and the 22% of them had to really fight for the position they eventually get. For the ones that claim their institution do not normally grant faculty position to the ones without PhD or MD, about 80% of them, they are not affiliated with the GC program. Next, we'll look at the responsibilities attached or the task attached to their faculty appointment. Not surprisingly, these are the ones we can think of for someone who has a faculty position: mentor students, teaching, service on committee as a committee members, administration work, research, publishing papers. Also, they do clinical care, writing grants, and some other responsibilities. And when we break down them into the ones affiliated with GC program and not affiliated with GC programs, the blue bars are the ones with the GC programs. Almost 100% of them, they have reported mentor students and teaching responsibilities. And the less of them reported in the ones not affiliated with GC programs. In the clinical care, more responses from the ones which are not affiliated with GC programs. In terms of the time commitment, we asked about the percentage of the time adjust to 40 hours per week they spend on each specific tasks. Clinical care is the one who takes up most of, more time. About 50, for the ones from the affiliated with GC programs, about less than 30% of them, of their time weekly spent on the clinical care versus 50% of the time spent on clinical care from the ones which are not affiliated with GC programs. And of course, the ones affiliated with GC programs spend more time on teaching and the mentoring students and administration work. About the research, the ones which are not affiliated with GC programs spend more time on research. Next, we'll look at the requirements at the time they were applying for their current position. Here is a summary of all the most popular requirements reported by the participants. At the top are the ones reported by most of the GCs, the participants, and moving down, it's less and less. ABGC or equivalent certification, recommendation letters, teaching experience, publication history, minimum of 3 to 5 years of practice, particular specialty areas, research experience, and administrative experience. These are the most common requirements reported. I want to point out when we break down into the GC and the non-GC program positions, teaching experience, minimal years of practice, and administrative experience were valued or were required more by the GC programs positions. And these are the statistically significant differences. Next, we'll look at the satisfaction rate in the participants reported who have a faculty position. First, we surveyed their motivation or the factors driving them into pursuing such a position. As we can tell, career advancement, level of autonomy, teaching opportunity to teach students, were the top 3 important factors driving interest in this path. And the job benefits, flexibility in the working environment other than clinical environment, working hours, location, affiliation with a GC program, opportunity to conduct research, and eligibility to carry out the studies independently were some other important factors reported by the GCs who have a faculty position. I highlighted 3 things on this table: career advancement, level of autonomy, job benefits. These were the factors driving the GCs into this career. However, it's really not fulfilled from talking to the GCs and also from our data, which are not showed on this talk. How opportunity to teaching was the one driving a lot of the GCs into this path, and also they got the opportunity to do this task, which is great. Overall, most GCs were happy about their job. When we break down into the extremely satisfied and somewhat satisfied categories, we do find statistical significance in the extremely satisfied individuals. The ones who have a position affiliated with the GC program, 60% of them, there are 60% of this one, of the individuals are from the GC programs, and less than 40% are from the non-GC programs positions. And we found the ones who are less happy about their job, even though the number is small, but they were more likely to be reported from the positions which are not affiliated with the GC programs. Lastly, we want to talk about the challenges reported by the GCs who are facing day-to-day life. We summarized these challenges into different themes. The most reported one is the little recognition and support from their institution. Here are some quotes. General lack of understanding of our field, our contributions to the education of medical providers, and our qualifications for appointment. Another one stated that I met the criteria for faculty appointment a year prior to it being granted. There is a lot of back and forth at my institution in terms of people required to sign off on and approve things, so it moves slowly. This was frustrating and disappointing. Another common theme about the challenges, obstacles they faced is the MD PhD requirement or preference. Many institutions will not allow non-MD PhD clinicians on the faculty track. If they do, there could be requirements about making a certain percentage of your salary through patient billing or grants, which can be a challenge for a genetic counselor. I choose this quote to summarize, to represent the theme 3 and 4, which is a poorly defined criteria and a lack of promotion path. There is no pathway for moving up within the faculty appointment. Limitations also include no definition of a role based on this appointment. In conclusion, most of genetic counselors find academic appointment rewarding because of opportunities to teach, to mentor students, and to conduct research. There were reported obstacles and challenges, but the obstacles to career advancement in academic setting will require changes at the institutional level. And this is the hope of this talk. We can use this data to make such a change to be real, to happen in the near future. Last, I want to thank these individuals on these slides, my committee members, my thesis advisors, and all the faculties and the Brandeis GC programs. And lastly, I will also want to thank all the participants of my study, and thank you all for voicing your experience and your struggles and your opportunities, how you find your way, how you fight and get your way. Next, I'm going to hand the time over to my co-speaker, Dawn, and we will hear about her experience.
Thank you, Yuri. That was great. What I have for you guys is basically a case study and just what we heard from Yuri. I entitled it, What a Long, Strange Trip It's Been, because it's all very changeable here on the academic career ladder at Emory. And I'm going to take you through some of the key points of what we learned and the different aspects that we ran into as we moved through things. So when I originally got to Emory, my goal was to get hired by Emory. I didn't have any thoughts about what level I wanted to be. I didn't have any thoughts about supervising people. This is my third job, so I was about 4 years out. And, makes you like you're experienced but not too experienced, right? So at this point, there was only a 2-rung ladder at Emory. There was head genetic counselor, and then there was all the other genetic counselors. This is 2002, and at this point, there were a few senior GCs who were faculty. They were leveled as instructors. You jump forward about 3 years, the career ladder did get a little bit bigger. So then we had co-head genetic counselors. We had 2 head genetic counselors. We had 1 genetic counselor supervisor who was over one particular group and also supervised the front staff. And then there were all the genetic counselors. So as you might expect, this was a little bit more of a chaotic time. My goal here was I would like to be able to suggest an idea and implement them. At this point, even though it was chaotic, there was a pretty strict structure, which was that the genetic counselor would talk to their direct report if they had an idea, and that direct report would take it to the higher levels of the team. During this point, I was busily trying to make a genetic infusion center, and it was very frustrating to have limitations put on who you could talk to in the career ladder. At this time as well, the two of the few genetic counselors who had faculty status had it stripped from them. They said it was just going to be a change in policy, and since faculty status for genetic counselors was re-upped on a yearly basis, they just chose not to re-up it. One of the reasons for this was they said that the genetic counselors were not full-time anymore. Therefore, they would take this particular thing away. It was not a great moment for genetic counselors, I have to say. Over the next few years, things changed a little bit. We moved into what we call the bucket head system. We had one head genetic counselor, and then we had 3 buckets of genetic counselors, and there was a lead over each of those. Now, mind you, each of these head genetic counselors still had the genetic counselor as an official title. They just tossed in there a changing title, which started as bucket head. And then when we said that's perhaps not the most academic type of title, they moved us to section leader. And when we said that makes us sound like we play the flute really well, they moved us to being program leaders. So we were whiny, but it did make a difference in how we changed our titles for the heads of each of these buckets. At this point, genetic counselors were not encouraged to seek faculty status. They kept telling us there's no benefit to it, really. You don't really want to do it. It just means you've got to come to more meetings. And we all went, oh, all right. We don't necessarily believe you, but that's what we're going with. During this point, my goal was to successfully lead my team through these challenges and these changes. Changes are hard. And so at this point, I was the LSD bucket head, or the program leader, as we eventually became known as. And it really made a difference. I felt my goal was really internally focused within my team at that point. I didn't feel like as much part of a broader whole. And I think that one of the things about career ladders is it helps you understand where you fit in the broader scheme of things. All right, so around 2007, we did actually get a formalized genetic counselor ladder. It's the one we still have today. GC1 are new grads, those who have not yet been certified. GC2 comes about after a year of clinical care and when you're certified, and you kind of stay in that role forever and ever and ever until someone decides that you are experienced enough to be a GC3. I think number-wise you have to be over 5 years of experience, but in general you don't make GC3 till you've been around for a long time. And then you can be a GC supervisor. So supervisors were really reserved just for those 3 heads of each of the groups, and so there wasn't really a career ladder. Mind you, this is still the same ladder we have now, the circa 2007 ladder. It's fine, it's what we have, but it doesn't leave much room for people to think about their advancement. At this point, GCs were still not encouraged to seek faculty status. My goal at the time was to build a strong, cohesive, self-supporting team. Whoa, you guys, 2010, 2011 was a mess. We had one of one of 2, we had a beloved medical geneticist pass away very unexpectedly. We didn't have enough doctors. We suddenly moved half our team under healthcare instead of university. That was including our team. Job titles were the same 3 set that we had before, but all of the power structures were very confusing and everybody was sad and it was just a mess. So let's just forget 2010, 2011. Can we ignore that one? Because in 2011 into 2012, we had 2 amazing things come that really changed how our ladder works and how our advancement opportunities worked. One is that Dr. Michael Gambello came and he became our new division head. We kind of had a no division head for a couple years during that dark time. And also Cecilia Bellcross and Andy Fawcett established a training program in 2011. As you saw with Yuru's paper, this really made a big difference. Once the training program was up, they encouraged the official GC supervisors to apply for faculty status. Part of that was because one of those GC supervisors was then assistant director, and then the other 2 of us were working within the program supervising students and teaching. And so we were really encouraged now that we had teaching, we seemed like we'd meet the faculty requirements, and they really supported our application to be an instructor. My goal during this time, I was like, sure, fine, I'll be an instructor, I'll join faculty. But I also would like to be able to put in grants of my own research under my own name. Because in the past, everything I did was under one of the physicians. So at this point, I was really interested in being able to apply for grants and get credit for my own research on the front end as well as the back end. So what did it take to become faculty? All those things you mentioned in your presentation. You had to show teaching, you had to show you're doing a good job, and you had to show you were doing scholarship. And there were different tracks at that time. There was clinical, there was educational, and there was another track. None of these for genetic counselors was an option to do tenured. So I did. I applied, and I was able to become the first rung of instructor. This is one of the rare moments where we were able to get faculty status in a really long time, and we were supported in it. And again, that had to do with change in division head and just the advocacy of the genetic counselor program and the opportunities it brought. And additional supervisors who were outside of Emory were provided with adjunct faculty status, which was great. But you'll see that our job title is still the same. We still only have 4 rungs to this day. My career goals at this point, I was doing pretty well. I enjoyed my work. Job satisfaction was high. Every day was different. I did clinical work, I did research work, and I did administrative work, and I taught. And that worked out pretty well. One thing I did find at this point was that I wanted to focus on the team more and how we could help them feel like they were moving through things. And what we did is we developed the Genetic Clinical Trials Center at this point, and that's just because we moved from just doing clinical trials in lysosomal storage diseases. We added different diseases. So we thought it was time to really focus on what that means, and so we did this. You don't have to go through this, it's a lot of words, but the key thing is that only 3 people who are genetic counselors in this out of about 13 genetic counselors were faculty. So what do? My shift moved from how do we reward people for doing such a great job in specializing in different areas that doesn't reflect the GC titles of 1, 2, 3 supervisor. So I started looking at what people are most interested in doing, and we were developing titles such as, you're a genetic counselor, you're a GC2, but you are also the regulatory specialist in IRB, you're a liaison. Or you can see that we developed a point where we said, okay, you're assistant director of the Genetic Clinical Trial Center, or okay, you're going to be the administrative head of something in Genetic Clinical Trial Center. So we developed titles that were not on the specific career ladder, but gave people ownership to the external world that said, this is what I'm really good at, as well as being a genetic counselor and being a clinical research coordinator. We also looked at different opportunities. We started getting certified as a clinical research coordinator through ACRP, which is an organization that certifies in clinical research. And because most of my team also does clinical research, they were able to get that certification on top of their NSGC ACMG certification. And it really helped, and it helped people feel they were moving up to the next level. So this is my travels, you guys. You can see how we went from just having a specific title, which was genetic counselor, which I was just fine with, to when we moved into a ladder structure, moving up to GC3, and then GC supervisor like within a minute. And then adding instructor and assistant professor to that. I also have these clinical appointment job titles, and sometimes I think that our ability to reflect what we're doing is more on the clinical appointment job title side, more than the academic job title side. That's just my bias. I think that it's a nice job of really looking at what people are doing and how it reflects what's going on with it. So in my case, this has never been about the title or the money. It was really about what I could do and what my limitation was and how I can support those who are on my team. Because I can tell you that as I moved up the career ladder, there's only a few points in which my salary in any way increased with these titles, whether it was a clinical or an academic title. When I moved from GC supervisor to an official instructor, there was a big bump of salary there because they were looking at the salary range for people who were categorized as faculty instructor. Let's face it, a genetic counselor salary on our ladder and an academic salary is much lower than those. So it was tied a little bit once I became on faculty track. But when I was a genetic counselor, I had academic salary like everybody else. The most important thing for me, though, no matter what my job title was that I enjoyed what I was doing and make sure that I was fairly paid for it. Now, I just told you that I had different titles that didn't reflect my salary, but I took those titles because I enjoyed what I was doing, or there was a necessity for me to do it, that I would be the best person to help the team flourish if I did that role. Key thing I always try to remember, though, is why did I get into genetic counseling? Did I do it because I wanted to see patients? Did I do it to help people? Did I do it to learn more? And the answer is yes, all those things. Did I do it to do a lot of faxing and talking to the insurance people? I did not, but that's what we're stuck with to do our key goal. As I said, not all promotions come with a raise, and you get to decide if you're going to take that promotion if it has no raise. You don't have to do it. But look ahead to what happens after that, because you may, like in this case, because I started doing more teaching, because I started doing more within the aspects I did, it set me in line to get a raise when I moved to faculty status. And that would not have been an option if I said, no, I don't want to teach, or no, I don't want to be program leader. That wouldn't have happened. So sometimes just adding a title doesn't help you, but down the road it might. But if you're going to get a whole lot of more work or supervised experience, you need to get paid for it. I think sometimes before you get a promotion, you feel undervalued or underappreciated. And that's a time when you need to figure out why you feel that way. Because if it's the culture of the place that you're in, it's a supervisory structure that you're within, you need to decide if you like that and it's something that can be fixed or changed or not. Because if it's not making you happy, we spend a lot of time at work. You need to find something that's going to make you happy. We've got good flexible degrees and we've got a big demand. So if you feel that you are being undervalued or you're not moving up the career track the way that you feel really makes sense, and then you fact check it, right? You got to fact check it with your people, whether that is your genetic counselor buddies or maybe a trusted individual outside or your supervisor. Check and make sure that's what you're looking for. Also, in medical fields, when you get a promotion, it often means you're going to do more administrative work and less patient contact. True for me, true for many people. And you've got to decide if that's good for you. If what gets you up in the morning is seeing patients and doing all the stuff that comes with that, you don't necessarily want to go into director role where all you're going to do is shuffle stuff and determine salaries and do a lot of the parts that feel like busy work but are really important for an area to run. And you got to remember work-life balance. All promotion often means more work. So determine if you're at a point where you can take on more work or you can't. Now, mind you, I took on more work when I just had a baby. So sometimes the opportunity comes and you have to take it, and sometimes work-life balance takes priority. Just depends on the day. And remember that in all of these, there's stressful parts to these roles, and you need to have a group of people or a tribe that's going to support you and help you do stress relief and also help you check how you're feeling and what's going on with what's going on in the general world. Because sometimes you may feel dissatisfied at work, but really it's something outside of work that you're bringing with you. And then also having a really good mentor. I had amazing mentors when I moved into space. Karen Grainside to be the first #1, and then also counselors from different institutions. Eleanor Botha, Angela Wittenauer, just too many to name. And they really make a big difference here. Angela Walter, sorry, not Wittenauer. Wittenauer is great too, but Walter. So I just want to say, I come from a great big team, and that's why I think I'm team focused and not as title focused, but I think it's important for us to also understand that titles are important in career advancement, and titles are important for the outside world to understand what you're doing, as well as who's seeing what a great job you're doing internally. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker.
Okay, so today I'll be focusing really on the clinical aspect of the ladder. And really, this is sort of a case study of just the ladder at my institution, and sort of a disclaimer, my institution is a cancer center only. And so I think that makes our ladder a little bit more straightforward, because we don't have to take into account multiple departments or, different roles that genetic counselors may take, because we all generally have the same patient care and type of roles that we're taking. So to start off, just to give a history, really our ladder started in 2015, and it was accepted that year and drafted really when there was one genetic counselor at the institution. But in 2015, when it was approved by HR, there were 4, I think a 5th started right after that. And so it really was not something that we identified as being applicable to us anymore. And so I've highlighted that arrow from 2015 to 2016, because in 2016 is when we really said, hey, there are significant shortfalls with this first iteration of the ladder, and this is not going to be beneficial for us to keep the ladder in its current state. And so we really need to change the way that it's structured, change how we move up these levels, and make this more beneficial for us and for the institution overall. And so in 2017, we had 6 genetic counselors on staff, and that's when our second ladder was accepted. And then in 2019, we said, hey, this isn't, there are some significant updates that we would like adapted because this, again, isn't serving our needs in the best way anymore. And so in 2020, with 8 genetic counselors on staff, we had the 3rd iteration of our ladder that was accepted. And really, there are a bunch of things that changed. And I think that that first transition was really important for us because we could make, or we were allowed to make enormous changes that really, I think, benefited us in the long run. And we're going to really talk about what those changes are. So I'm going to warn you, my slides have a lot of words on them, and I'm so sorry. But there's so much that I could comment on, and I think that I just wanted to get my biggest points across on these slides, and you all can read them later. But this is our current structure. We have 4 levels in addition to a lead GC. And similar to what Dawn mentioned, we do have a different sort of setup for our genetic counselors who are new grads. From those who have just gotten their certification, but it still falls under GC1, which is different than her ladder. And this is basically moving up, and we take into account different length of experience. Time at our institution is a consideration, although it's not required to move up. You have to have satisfactory annual reviews, and then of course get CEUs and sort of maintain your education and do everything that we all do anyway. And there are some stipulations that we added to our ladder that we found are really helpful, and this was something that we changed in that first update that we provided. And so really at our institution we said you have to move up to a GC2, but you do not have to move past that, because we recognized that there were some people who their interest was not moving up the rung and getting that GC4 title, which is okay, but we did want to make sure that we had some stipulations in there that said that's fine that you stay at GC2, but you do need to maintain a certain level of points each year so that we know you're still contributing to the institution, to the group, you're still invested in this position. And you can read through there in terms of the point values. You do have to be full-time. And then HR worked with us to come up with a review process. This is reviewed once a year if you want to submit for promotion or advancement through this ladder. And really, we find that I think that this is a good check-in point so that we all know what we have to do or what's required for advancement, and HR knows what to expect from us as well. And HR is going to be coming up in my portion of this talk a lot, because really working with them has been the biggest part of making this successful. And so just to give additional background here, we earn points at Moffitt, the institution that I work at, through 4 different realms, and you can see them there. I think most of us participate in activities that would fall under any of these categories, on a daily or even weekly basis. And there are points assigned to different activities. Now, these activities that you earn points on are almost always activities that are not described in your job description, because you already agreed to do those, those responsibilities that are laid out. And really the advancement was, what are the extra things that you're doing that we can capture and use to your advantage? And the point values are based on, is it a national presentation or is it a local presentation? And you get points for both of those, but you get more points for more visibility, for more effort. If it's some sort of planning a national conference versus planning a local conference, you're going to earn a lot more points with that extended effort. And we include a lot of different things in our ladder, and I'll get to this in a moment. Our ladder is set up this specific way for a reason. So in addition to that first sort of spread of GC 1 through 4, we have a tracking sheet for each genetic counselor to keep track of their points. We have a whole list of points that can be earned under the 4 different categories. And then we also have appendices, and those appendices were really for HR to justify why we should get those points. So doing a presentation, clinical supervision, how long was the supervision, how many cases did we support, did we serve on a committee, how long was that, how many meetings did we attend, all of that we can provide justification for so that we have a rock solid case to HR as to why our advancement should take place. And I wanted to mention one thing. Our salary is actually tied to our title, and we had a little bit of say within that salary range for each group, but not too much. And so there is some overlap between GC2 and GC3, for example, but HR was ultimately the group that determined what that salary range was going to be for each one. So our ladder is set up this way because other ladders within our institution had this same format. So we knew it was something that HR was familiar with and obviously accepted. And I went through with a fine-tooth comb the nurse and the nurse practitioner ladders to try and figure out what can we take from there. So I don't need to reinvent the wheel, but how can we adapt that to work best for us? Our second iteration of the ladder really increased how much information we provided to HR to justify those advancements. And we also found that this second iteration of the ladder is extremely easy to edit and add. And I think that that's been a huge really success of our ladder, because we can easily add to the ladder and adjust it to meet the needs as we see that things change, because our profession is not static. And so I think it's very important that we're able to adapt to that change with our clinical ladder. So we have many challenges, and one of them is communication with HR. We have to communicate through our supervisor, and she's not a genetic counselor, and so trying to communicate to her the nuances of something specific that she needs to then communicate to HR for why we have something set up a certain way can be a challenge. We intended for our ladder to be used as a hiring matrix. HR did not enact it that way. And so that's something that we're having constant communication with them about still. And then there have been occasions where language, for example, has been changed within the ladder, and it wasn't really communicated to our supervisor, who then did not communicate it to us. And so later down the line, we said, what is this language? We haven't seen this before. And so, it's just sort of a breakdown in communication there. And so we've learned that we need to really have an open dialogue, or try to have an open dialogue with them. Now, we know that it was inevitable to be missing activities, and that's one of the challenges. We're constantly going to be missing activities, and that can be frustrating. And we also wanted to make sure that there was a balance, and this is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, a balance between making the mobility upward possible, but not easy, because we don't want people to be maxing out, which I'm going to comment on in the future, too early, but we also don't want them to feel like it's hopeless to move up. And so finding a balance, striking that balance of, allowing that mobility upwards without really, making it as just something that's not worth much within the eyes of HR or, our colleagues. The other things that we found as challenges were, our supervisor was integral in helping move things forward. We had a lack of control over some parts of things. So for example, the hiring matrix, we had no idea that that was not something that was going to be used. I didn't even know a hiring matrix was a thing until we tried to hire someone, and then we ran into this. We identified this issue. And then again, trying not to max out too early within the ladder, and what do we do? How do we try and fix that or adjust our ladder to better meet our needs? And so when you're, if you're developing a ladder, or if you're in the process of editing your ladder, these are sort of my tips. And I already mentioned the job description. Start there. We have a document that all of the genetic counselors, we have 8, soon to be 9, I think, at this point, where all of us can add edits to this document for consideration. It's not saying it's going to be taken for sure into the update, but something that we can consider. And, consider the time that it takes to move up throughout the ladder. Do your genetic counselors have the ability to complete the points needed to move up in the ladder in the time that they have outside of their job responsibilities? And again, I think making it as editable and easy to add to as possible will be really helpful. And I think with that, we'll move on to one more. I'm sorry, one more slide. There are a few more considerations. And so, gather ladders from other positions if they're available. What is HR looking for? How will it be used for hiring? And then I think the biggest thing is include language that allows for flexibility. I forgot to mention this in our points. We say, an activity completed by a genetic counselor for a point value approved by the manager if it's not included in, or something that we've already spelled out. So, we've tried to do our best to address some of the challenges, and I encourage you to do that too if you're making a ladder for yourself. And so with that, I will now pass it on to Kylie.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. That was lots of great information. So let me go ahead and advance here. So I'm going to take a little bit of a transition and slightly different approach from the rest of my co-speakers to talk a little bit about some experience in the industry aspect of looking at career ladders. And so full disclosure, I am an employee of and shareholder of Gene Matters. Just to briefly set the stage, because a lot of what I'll be talking about is my experiences within Gene Matters. For anyone who doesn't know, we're a telehealth genetic counseling group. So we provide services to patients virtually via telehealth platform that we developed. So just to set the stage there. So one of my experiences both with Gene Matters and other industry aspects that I've been part of that I think is a little bit different is that with the industry setting of genetic counselors, there is a slightly greater chance that there may be spanning of different departments, roles, and responsibilities. While that certainly happens in clinical settings and academic settings, it seems to be a little bit more even so in industry. So thinking about where genetic counselors fit, how our skill sets can be used, and how those can span across clinical roles, sales, marketing, operations, customer support, really kind of open some interesting paths, I think, for industry genetic counselors. One of the things I'll speak to a bit here, but also sort of show you throughout my presentation, is that something to sort of consider is that many times you will see that larger industry organizations may have further developed a career ladder within a position. So a genetic counselor 1, a genetic counselor 2, et cetera. Some of the smaller organizations may not have built out all of those ladders within a given position, but there may be other open sort of positions and roles that are not clearly fully established. So I think something that's a little bit unique in the industry aspect, just given those variabilities. So I want to take a moment and just give you sort of an example using Gene Matters here of how, while starting a company and working sort of from the ground up, there may not have been a fully established plan, but sort of what that has ended up looking like over time. So this is just an organizational structure of our company, and you can see in the yellow are all roles that genetic counselors hold either fully or there is at least one genetic counselor within that role. So our CEO is a genetic counselor, myself as VP of Operations, and then we've established multiple other roles as the company has evolved, such as a director of genetic counseling, a director of research. We have genetic counselors in the business development roles. And then, of course, very importantly, as a clinical business, we have leads in our specialty areas, GC leads, and then genetic counselors who are providing all of those important clinical care services, and a customer success manager role as well. And so from the very beginning, when our CEO Jill had established the company, there was only a couple of rungs to what we had for genetic counselors within the organization, but many of this has been built over time indeed. So I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what is entailed in each one of these roles and give you an idea of kind of some of the different experiences that have been brought in each of these roles, because I think that's helpful to paint a little bit of the picture of what can happen in an industry setting. So our clinical GCs, as an example, are obviously all genetic counselors that are licensed and certified, and they have at least 3 years of experience, and they are able to counsel across 2 or more specialties. Our genetic counselor team leads are probably not much dissimilar from many of the leads that my co-speakers have been talking about. They usually have 8 to 10 years of expertise in at least one given specialty, sometimes more, and have displayed people leadership skills because they do become the leads over our clinical GC team members. One of our newest positions has been a customer success manager, where we've really found genetic counselor expertise in someone who is both been in a business role facing customers previously from a medical affairs and sales side, and is able to sort of transition that into our customer facing role with us. And then our director of genetic counseling services is over our team leads, and so has prior experience, obviously, in clinical care, but also experience in leading teams at another organization. Our director of business development, typically those are individuals who either have been providing genetic services or selling genetic services or tests in their prior organization. And then our director of research has had 10 or more experience in 10 or more years of clinical experience in research and is working to obtain a PhD. Myself as VP of operations, we'll talk about that in a moment, and then our CEO, who's had 20 plus years of experience. So you can sort of see why, these positions were obviously created over time because we started as a very small organization and had need to grow as the company grew. And some of the key portions there are, we needed to build and scale our GC services. So obviously more genetic counselors were going to be needed. We needed to scale our operations and attend to those growing customer needs. So things like a customer success specialist and having team leads that could help scale our GC support, as well as our genetic counseling assistant support, were really going to be critical. And then, of course, as a team grows, ensuring that our genetic counselors, genetic counseling assistant team, and other members are all getting that support and that company camaraderie that's needed. And so those additional pieces of infrastructure are really critical to embed within the team. So just to give you a little bit of an example using myself of, how someone may transition through an industry more based role. So I started out with about 5 to 6 years in standard clinical practice at a large academic medical center in several different areas. And within that organization, in my last 3 or so years with them, moved into sort of more innovative service models. So it was working a little bit on the business side in building a new service model, as well as working in a research project to develop a biobank. So transitioned a bit within there, and then moved on to an industry setting in a couple of different roles. So got telehealth experience as a clinical genetic counselor in a telehealth role, and then also worked with a genetic counseling or genetic testing company as a medical science liaison. So really working with the sales team members and with customers in the field to really help them understand genetic testing and counseling needs. And so all of those pieces, while none of them were planned, to be honest with you, really led into, the experience that I'm currently in and have been able to help grow, and that is working here with Gene Matters and growing into the VP of Clinical Operations, really using some of those business aspects that I've learned across time, but also incorporating all of the really critical clinical skills that I've learned. So some things to consider just, with an industry hat on, but also I think from a career ladder perspective in general. And I think some of my co-speakers mentioned this, but think about the fact of whether you really are interested in leading people or do you prefer to advance without having to be a direct people leader. Recognize that clinical expertise, while it's really important, may not always be the only thing that's needed for advancement in industry. So sometimes having those multiple varied roles within industry and within a clinical setting can really help in furthering you down that path. And then I would say sometimes there's this piece of us that I know is challenging, but being patient and recognizing that sometimes we need to have that patience to move through an organization as it grows. You may not always see, exactly what that downstream is going to look like, but really thinking about what those opportunities might be. And then from an industry perspective, really thinking about that business acumen and working through that. There are unique pieces that are learned in the business aspect, but there may be additional things that you could do from a course or education perspective that could help with that as well. Oops, I advanced here too quickly. So overall, I want to be sure that we have time for everybody for some questions here, but I think probably what goes a long way is in thinking about career ladders in general, no matter what area you come from, is to really be thinking about networking within your organization and outside of it. It's very clear within our genetic counseling community. There's been so many interplays that I've had with colleagues in current roles and in past roles, that those are really critical key points of context to continue. Work hard. Obviously, that one really goes without saying, but dream also beyond your job description. So be thinking about, here's where I am now, but where am I looking to go, and what all does that involve? Become an asset to your company. Help them see that. Think and sort of act a level above where you are, but caveat that with not stepping outside boundaries. We've heard other people talk about the fact that sometimes there are channels of communication that you do need to go through. So be sure that you're sort of following suit with that, but be thinking about that next level. And of course, be a team player. So with that, I will transition back to our leaders.
All right, thank you to all of our speakers for providing such great insight into how the career ladder has been implemented and executed within all of your various genetic counseling practices. We've had some great questions come in. Unfortunately, given the time, we only have time for just one or two, so I wanted to highlight some of them. So to start off, Dawn, this question came in earlier for you. When you develop titles not tied to the actual ladder, how are those titles recognized by HR and the institution?
I run them by the division head and the departmental head when I develop a title and make sure they're comfortable with that title. HR does not have a formal recognition for that. The only thing that HR formally recognizes is that GC1, GC2, GC3 supervisor, instructor, faculty status. So all those things are outside of the realm of HR when it comes down to it. Weird, but that's how it is.
Thank you. All right, this question came in a little bit later. Why is full-time status a requirement for advancement? Can part-time employees move up, or is this to discourage GCs from being part-time? With the point system, it seems like excluding this possibility may be unnecessary. As a long-time part-time who has been innovative and become an expert in my specialty while being part-time, I would hate to see others excluded from making all kinds of life professional choices. And I think that can apply to any of our speakers.
So I'll
today.
speak to that since that was on my slide.
Right.
That was from HR. So that was not even a conversation that we had. That was present in the other ladders. We do have, individuals at our institution who are part-time, who obviously are nurses and nurse practitioners. We don't actually have any genetic counselors at this moment who are part-time. So it hasn't been an issue that's been raised, but it was not something that we even had a conversation about because it was something that came from HR.
I have just a quick comment on that. Although at one point we did have issues with part-time, we don't anymore. And I think that's one of the things that with an academic institution, it does help with some of that flexibility. I don't know, like we go up and down in our time all the time. So when you have a baby, you may go to 20 hours, you may go back up to 22, you may go back down. So I guess that's the benefit. We have lower salaries, but part-time is easy.
Okay, thank you. How do you justify the career ladder clinically when our institutions view GC programs, academic positions in medical school, and clinical positions in hospital all as separate entities? This particular member mentioned that HR told them that clinically, where salary comes from, a career ladder is not possible since an entry-level GC performs same tasks as an experienced GC, and that teaching and supervision research are all not part of the job description and therefore are personal choices to participate in versus promoting the profession.
You gotta have somebody who fights it. And Kathleen's job description.
Yeah, our institution has taken a completely different view from your institution, so I can't really comment too much on that because they really want us to be involved with the teaching and supervision and all of that. And so, while it's not in our job description laid out like you must do these things, it is highly encouraged. And it was essentially one of those things where we said, hey, if you want to hold on to experienced people and you want us to complete these activities because you think it reflects well on the institution, you need to adapt this. So I'm sorry, I can't speak better to that.
Well, I think actually Kathleen's, point system and ladder system is something you could take back to your institution and say, look, this is what it's like in an institution. Look at how they count each of these points. We need to reconsider our job description so that we can add these into what's going on. But somebody's going to have to really take it on as their big fight, and it may need to be your supervisor. As someone who's weathered many a fight, sometimes you got to keep hanging at it. It may take 5 years, but eventually it will happen.
And on that note, Kathleen, would you be able to share your point tracking system with the group today?
I would love to say yes, but I'm just not sure. So I'm going to have to ask the powers that be and see if I can send that information to everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to all of our speakers today. This concludes today's webinar, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.